Okay, welcome all to Kabbalah Café. This is our brand new series. The series is entitled Spiritual Gender, which I will explain in a moment. But before we get into the name of the series and the new book that we're studying, the new text, I want to point out a few things that I think is very important. Obviously, in the times that I think that everybody has been.
I don't know what that means.
Right. Sometimes it thinks that I summoned it, and I did not summon it. SIRI, whatever. Moving along. So, obviously what's on our hearts and our minds is what's going on in Israel and the Holy Land. And first of all, we pray for the safety and security of our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land and wherever they may be found. We pray for the safe return of all those that were taken. We pray for the end of conflict and the era of peace. That's what we all pray for, Mashiach. And I was thinking in the context of this week's Torah portion, when I say this week, I mean, Sunday begins, we already get ready for the next Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is Noach, right? Or Noah, right? So it's like, you need to build an ark. I know a guy. All right. Anyway, so Noach was it's the meme, right? Noach was the guy I see behind me. They're taking apart the sukkah, right? So this week is about building an ark. They're taking down a sukkah. It's happening. Tools are out and wood is being moved around. It took them 120 years to build the ark. 120 years. And what was the point? The point of the 120 years was in order to kind of rally the troops, to inspire people to improve their ways. What's important to recognize is that, however you slice the narrative, the bottom line is the Torah is telling us, the Bible is relating the truth that that evil has an expiration date. In other words, that nefariousness eventually, some way or another, comes to an end. And so we hope, of course, that all evil, all horror in the world come to an end. Certainly the ones that we've seen recently that affect our family, literally and figuratively, should come to an end. The terror, the horror, the pain, the suffering, the bloodshed. Also, it's I think what's of note is what the Torah says. A few things. So number one, when you build an ark, instead of drowning in the flood, you end up floating on top of the water. Right? That's the difference between having an ark and not having an ark. So Kabbalah says that the world can sometimes feel like a flood. We're inundated with all sorts of stresses and anxieties and concerns. We build an ark, then we can find a safe haven and have the ability to be okay. What is an ark? In Hebrew, the word for ark is teva. Teva in Hebrew also means word. And so the deeper significance, good morning. The deeper significance is that how are we safe? Ignore the long extension cord. As I pointed out. So the idea is that as long as we are able to find space within the word, right, whether that's the word of Torah or the word of prayer or the word even of mitzvah, of good deeds, then we're able to find safety and shelter in those spaces and not get inundated by the anxieties, but on the contrary, float above. And one more thing about the architecture of the ark is that God tells Noah, he says, Sohar Ta'aseh Lateva. He says, you shall build or you shall create or make a Sohar for the ark. Well, the obvious question is, what's a Sohar? Sohar is an interesting word. It's not a common word in the biblical lexicon. So what is Sohar? So the classic biblical commentary, Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, he gives two explanations he offers two options as to what Sohar means. Either Sohar is a window, or Sohar is a precious gem that was radiant and luminescent. So again, two options. Either it's a window or it's a gem. What does that mean exactly? So if it's a window, it was kind of like a skylight. Probably not a good idea to make an open window when it's raining. I'm just saying, probably not a great idea. But it's kind of like a skylight to bring in light from the outside. That's the first opinion. The second opinion that Rashi cites is that it's a gem that somehow, I don't know how this works, somehow was able to shine on its own. And when we talk about shining on its own, what we mean is it's the idea of the light that is shining from inside. Now, how could a stone shine? Maybe it was that light came in from a skylight and then refracted and reflected in the stone and then created more radiance. It's possible. But I would say like this. I think that spiritually, these are two forms of light. There's the light that's on the outside, and then there's the light that's on the inside. There's the light that's on the outside, so that light's always there. And in order to enjoy that light, we have to create openings to allow the light in. So if we are closed to the light, then although the light's out there, we might never feel it, see it, or benefit from it. So what it takes is to create a window, to create an opening. Now, sometimes we create the window. Sometimes we break ourselves open from ego and other things that close us in to be open to the light. Sometimes life does that to us. So it can either be self-generated or perhaps, life-generated. Standing at the I guess the Solidarity Rally Tuesday night over here in City Springs, shoulder to shoulder with thousands and thousands of people in support of Israel. I found it, very powerful to see, first of all, see so many people in support of Israel, and also to reconnect with a lot of people that I haven't seen in a while. I thought it was really beautiful, and it kind of struck me the idea that, and we never look for these things, but when kind of things happen that break us open, light can come in. Again, this is not justifying horror. This is just saying the reality is that when we are broken, right, when we're broken open, life breaks us open. Light does come in. That's one point. But then that's all the window element. The other element is the self, like the gem, the light that is generated from within, the light that we generate and that we can generate. And I think that's equally as important. It's important to be open to the light outside of us, but it's also equally important to generate light from within. And that means, doing mitzvahs, studying Torah, prayer, encouraging being kind to someone. And I will say personally that I've had many encounters this past week, people either calling, texting, or offering support. And this Friday, 2 days ago, I'm in Kroger picking up some stuff before Shabbos, and a woman comes over to me in a random aisle, and she is very emotional, and she says, I'm not Jewish, I'm Christian, but I support you and I love Israel, and I feel so terrible for what's going on. And I want you to know that we support you and we love you, etc. And she's like super emotional. I got emotional. It was just a very powerful experience. And I think it's kind of these moments of humanity where you realize that there is light. It's not just evil. There is light out there, and our job is to capitalize on the light. Certainly our job here. If we were on the front, that would be, maybe we would have a different job. But here, our job is light. That's for sure. All right. So those are 2 points of light: outside, from without, and from within. Now I want to segue over to our new series. Our new series is called Spiritual Surrender. And I chose that title and the topic because I thought it would be a powerful conversation, and just to kind of set a bit of a bird's eye view on Kabbalah study. In Kabbalah, when you're studying Kabbalistic texts, there are really 2 forms of texts that are available for study. We would call that Haskalah and Avoda. What are these 2 words? Haskalah means more theoretical Kabbalah, philosophical Kabbalah. Kabbalah that speaks about ideas and realms and worlds and kind of spiritual dimensions. And then you have Avoda. Avoda means work or service or action. You have Kabbalah that's more along the lines of Avoda. What that means is Kabbalah that is designed to inspire action and to really shape the way we, day in, day out, do what we need to do. So it's less about the philosophy and more about, let's go, right? Rallying the troops, as it were. This discourse that we're going to study, this mystical text that we're going to study, that we're beginning today, is of the latter category. It's less Haskalah, it's less theoretical. It's not like the theory of Kabbalah. It's about integrating this into our lives and really connecting with it in a genuine, authentic way. And I thought it would be a great text to study after the holidays, because after all the inspiration of the month of Tishrei, which is a month filled with emotional highs I don't know, I wouldn't say lows, but just an emotional roller coaster. You have the somber days of Rosh Hashanah, certainly Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. Then you have the joyous days of Sukkot. So what better way to kind of, move away from that month of strong emotion with a text that will hopefully drive action and implementation of those feelings. Because feelings are good, but feelings are better when they drive action. Otherwise, they're wasted feelings. So today is Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. The first day, well, it's complicated, Jewish calendar. Complicated. It's the 30th day of Tishrei, but it's still the first day of Rosh Chodesh of Cheshvan. Again, super complicated, but here's the deal. Tishrei is the month of the high holidays, right? First month of the year. And then you have the next month, which is this month, which is the month of Cheshvan. It's also called sometimes Mar Cheshvan. Mar meaning like marar. What does marar mean? Bitter. It's called Mar Cheshvan, bitter Cheshvan, which is not a great title for a month. It's like, well, you know what? It's like you're talking to Cheshvan. It's like, you know what you are? You're bitter. It's like, whoa, that's kind of offensive. The reason why it's called that is because it starts getting cold. In the Northern Hemisphere, this is when winter, it starts getting colder. It starts getting darker earlier, right? It's cold and dark. There are no holidays in this month. After a month filled with, it's every other day there's a holiday, if not every day. So now the month of Cheshvan has 0 holidays, no holidays. It's kind of like, I always liken it to, at least in my head, maybe I've expressed this before in classes, but I liken it to, what happens after the curtains close, right? After the party's over. It's like, let's say a couple gets married. And so there's a lot of excitement. There's, there's dating, there's the engagement, there's getting ready for the wedding, there's the wedding, there's, the ceremony and the party and then the honeymoon. And there's all these moments of excitement. But then once everything is done, like all of the parties, everything is done, so then the couple moves in or whatever, they live their life. And the party's over. Hold on, that sounded wrong. No, the party's not over, but the extrinsic party is over. In other words, there's no mariachi, is it the right word? Band playing for you. There's no cake. Maybe there is, but
there's a register.
Exactly. You're just living your life. When I say just, not to minimize it, but now you're living your life. Now it's real. Because when the music, when the curtains close and the lights turn out and whatever, now it's real life. So it's almost like you have a whole month of Tishrei. It's all exciting. It's all like extrinsically, it lifts you up. And now it's like, okay, so now let's live with God for a month. Oh, like taking down the sukkah. But it's like after the sukkah's down. That's still exciting. It's still on some level. Exactly. It still goes on. Everything is over. Sounds so negative. I don't mean this negatively, but all the fluff is over. Now it's real. So you're back to real life. Mar Cheshvan, this month is actually the most important month. Tishrei, it's easy to be on a high. It's easy to be inspired. The question is Mar Cheshvan. Now it's getting tough. Now you have to really care. It's easy to care when there's a lot of noise. Now you have to really care because you care. So that's that and that. So I thought, what better text to study than a text that speaks about how to generate an authentic relationship with God when things aren't so exciting. And that leads me directly into an introduction for this text. I want to give the historical introduction or backdrop for this text, and then tell you thematically what we're doing here in this text, which is going to be amazing. So number one, historically, this discourse was taught in the year, the Jewish year 5666, Tav Reish Samach Vav, which corresponds to the English year, Gregorian year, named after Gregory, maybe. Must be Gregory. We call him Greg. Anyway, so it's corresponding to the year 1905. Now, here's the cool thing about this. The discourses of the year 5666, Tav Reish Samach Vav, went throughout more than a year of discourses, and each one they were what would be a good term? Serialized? Is that the right term? Where one leads to the next? Sequential, but it's kind of like a series. It's kind of, but now, it came out one at a time, but now you can binge it. It's amazing how this works because the whole book is there. If you want, you can binge it in one sitting. I'm kidding. I wish I would have brought my copy. It's the original Hebrew. It's a massive, thick, dense, incredible volume. It begins, the first discourse is Rosh Hashanah, and pretty much every week there's another discourse that came out that in this series, in the sequence series, and it talks about everything from the purpose of creation to, how to wake up in the morning and get what you need to get done. And so it talks about like the theory and the practice and everything in between. It's it's one of the classic works of Jewish mysticism, explained in a very relatable way. It's studied in yeshivot, in Jewish school, in higher levels of Jewish academies. This is something that I studied in my back in the day when I was in yeshiva, and it's something that's a very powerful thing. I'm excited to study this with you. Something I've never taught before. This is the only of the entire series of discourses, and there's many, many, many discourses in this series. There's only one that's been translated into English. That's what we're studying together. This is kind of cool. Everything else is locked in the Hebrew. By the way, in case you want to know, this was all handwritten manuscripts until it was published, not handwritten. You want to see the original handwritten manuscript of which this is taken from, that is it. Now, this is obviously not the original size. It was a little bit larger, but it wasn't that much larger. This is very, it's almost hard. I bet from across the room, Shana, you probably, Emerald? Yes, I would say it probably does not look like text. Probably just looks like a pattern on a page. Let me make sure you guys can see this online. I didn't hold it specifically up to the camera. My apologies. Hold on. Oh, I'm getting there. 1 second. Can you guys see that? No, I see it. It's coming up. Anyway, imagine if you made a mistake. How awkward. Back when everything was handwritten. You have to start again. Okay, so this is authored by the 5th Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Dov Ber Schneerson, who lived in, I think, where did he live then? Maybe Lubavitch. He later on moved to Rostov. Anyway, back in the old country. And this was when it came out, it was an instant classic. Again, this is this book, Tafrei Samavav, the series of discourses is known as like the creme de la creme of mystical conversation. And the discourse that we have in front of us, the one that's been translated, the one out of dozens and dozens that was of this series that was translated into English, speaks again very practically and very, very pointedly at what it is that is called upon us. And in order to introduce the theme of this discourse, because now I've told you about the historical background, in order to introduce the theme of this discourse, I want to share with you the following interesting detail, and that is that throughout the Torah we find multiple name changes. We find Abram changed to Abraham. In Hebrew, it's Avram, changed to Avraham. He got an extra hey. Sarai was changed to Sarah or Sarah. That's another name change. Who else? Who's? Oh yeah, but I'm saving that one for last. That's the one we're going to focus on. And there are other. Joshua. He was originally Hosea. I don't know what the English one for that is. Then he was changed to Shalom Shalom to Yehoshua. So there are name changes throughout Scripture, throughout the biblical text. And the Talmud goes so far to say that anyone who calls Avram, it's a special treat. Gilad, great to see you. Yeah. Welcome. First Kabbalah Café class? Yeah. Wow. All right. This is exciting. So the Talmud says that whoever calls Avram violates is reciting is doing so erroneously and sinfully, because once the name is changed, you don't go back to the old name. It's the way it is. Sarah, Avraham, Abraham. Yoshua, Joshua, those are the new names. We don't revert back to the old ones. Now, of course, when you're studying Torah and you encounter Avraham before the name change, so you read it before, but now when we refer to these biblical figures, we don't refer by the old name, only by the new name. Great. There's one exception, and that is Jacob. Jacob, Yaakov, right? His birth name is Yaakov, Jacob. At a certain point in time in his life story, his name is changed to Yisrael or Israel. But what's wild is that we find that the Torah switches back and forth between Jacob and Israel, between Yaakov and Yisrael. And so that leads the Talmud to conclude that one is allowed to call Yaakov by either name. Why? Because Torah itself, God himself, calls Yaakov by both names interchangeably, which doesn't really clarify things. It only raises more questions. Why is it by this guy that he has two names? Everyone else, once the name was changed, it was over. And here he has both. Why? So the answer is because, well, God uses both names. Well, that just shifts the question onto God. Why does the Torah use both names? And so I want to share with you, there are many different answers given. I want to share with you the mystical answer. The answer that's brought in Kabbalah, in Jewish mystical thought, and elaborated on in Hasidic discourses, is that each name, Yaakov and Yisrael, Jacob and Israel, each represents a different modality of divine service. In other words, it's not like an old way and a new way in which the new way replaces the old way and therefore you don't revert back to the old way. These are two simultaneously valid approaches to divine service. There's the modality of Yaakov, the modality of Yisrael. There's the Jacob and the Israel. And both are valid, both are legit, both are divine, both are spiritual paths of service. And the truth is, in each of us, they both exist simultaneously. And that's why, even though Jacob gets a new name, he still has the old name, because both personas exist. So when we examine what Yaakov represents, Jacob, and what Israel represents, we'll have deep insight into the nature of who we are, but also the nature of our divine service, and really also how we evolve. No, it's not really evolve. How we vacillate between various spaces in our divine connection. So let me explain. Why was Jacob named Jacob? Why was he called Yaakov? Like biblical, when you read the Torah, so his mother named him, they named him Yaakov, Jacob. Why?
Hold his brother heel.
He was holding his brother's heel. They were twins. By now, you know my joke about twins, right? What do you call twins? Woo mates.
Even after they're coming?
Before. So Esau was born first. Yaakov apparently did not like that. So it says, the Torah says, this is straight up Bible, it's not Medrash. It says he was holding on to his brother's heel. The Hebrew word for heel is Akev. So Yaakov, it's it's the same word essentially. So he was the heel holder, holding on to his brother's heel. That's his name, Yaakov. When does he get the name Yisrael, Israel? You remember? He crosses, so this is way later on in his life. So that's the origin story. That's how he gets the original name. Then later on in life, he's older. He's an adult now. He has spent 20 years away from his family. Jacob has spent by Laban, his uncle. He's now returning back home and about to encounter his brother. The Torah tells us that he leaves some. He crosses family over a stream, and then he goes back to get some stuff that he left behind. And as he's back alone by himself on the other side of the stream, river, whatever it was, brook, he encounters a man. Vayeavek ish, it says Vayevater Yaakov levado. Jacob remained alone. Vayeavek ish imo, and a man wrestled with him ad alot hashachar, until daybreak, till the break of dawn. Which is weird, because if he's alone, then who's wrestling with him? many commentaries on that. The simple meaning, of course, is he's alone without his family, but there's another guy there that he's wrestling with. According to the way we know the biblical narrative, this is not a man, this is an angel. And whose angel? It's the guardian angel of Esau. And they wrestle all night until the morning, when this angel had a shift up in heaven, and the angel says to Yaakov, to Jacob, let me go. He says, I'll only let you go if you bless me. The angel says to him, what's your name? He says, Yaakov. He says, no longer will your name be Yaakov, but rather Yisrael. Ki sarita im Elokim va'anashim va'tuchal. Because you, sarita, wrestled, struggled, whatever, with battled angels and men, and you prevailed. Yisrael, the name Yisrael, is a name that connotes victory. So Yaakov is the guy who's holding on to the other guy's heel. It's the scrappy persona. It's the wrestler. It's the wrestler. And who's Yisrael? Who's Israel? Israel is not the wrestler. Israel is the name that signifies, victory. But it's not just victory. It's kind of being above or being done with the struggle. Post-struggle. So Yaakov.
Would he be like an overcomer?
Yes. An overcomer. The one who's overcome. In other words, there's the stage of the struggle, and then there's a stage in which you're past the struggle. The struggle is in your rearview mirror. That's Israel. So Jacob is, when you're amidst the struggle, you're actually grabbing onto the other guy's heel, right? You're on the mat, and Yisrael is, it's over. You're past the conflict, you're past the struggle. Which already right now, if you think about this spiritually, we should already be able to understand why it is that Yaakov and Yisrael are two simultaneous names. Because each of us has areas in which we struggle, and each of us has areas in which we're past the struggle. I mean, hopefully. We don't struggle with everything, even areas that perhaps once upon a time we did struggle with. There are at least some areas in which we are past that struggle, in which we've overcome that challenge. We're no longer plagued. I don't know if plague is the right word. We're no longer anguished, more than anguished. We're no longer torn by that struggle. We're past it. Now, certainly we would think that the goal would be to be Yisrael all the time, right? To be Israel all the time, in every area, to have overcome all the challenges. But life is not always so easy. And so inevitably, even when we've overcome one challenge and we've now achieved, we've gotten the trophy, and the thing says your new name is Yisrael, you're still Yaakov. You're still a Yaakov. You're not Yisrael in every area. You're Yisrael in this area. Sure, you got your trophy. You passed the test or whatever it is. You're past that struggle. However, there are other areas in which you can get pulled right back into something else. And so that's why the Torah, again, mystically, that's why the Torah reverts back and forth between the two names of Yaakov and Yisrael, between Jacob and Israel, to tell us, to remind us that even after we've achieved spiritual victories, that doesn't mean that we are not susceptible to struggle. Could be, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of different angles on that. But this is one in which I think it reminds us that we can achieve, we can experience breakthroughs, but even as we do so, we will also have areas in which the breakthrough is not there. In other words, that's a normal part. It's a normal reality of life in which we're living these two worlds almost, the Yisrael and the Yaakov simultaneously. So to think that we're only Yaakovs and there's no hope for us, that's very depressing. To think that we should be all Yisraels and never have a challenge is not realistic. So it's kind of like this more realistic view of there will be areas in which we've made a lot of progress and areas in which we haven't made a lot of progress. And that's just a part of life. You know, even the, yeah,
When, Jacob at the time, grabbed this angel was gonna like melt like the wicked witch when the sun came up, so he needed to get back or something like that. So
I don't know I don't
Someone's coming up
know.
and Jake's like, no, I'm gonna.
I'm
keep
holding you
here
down,
till
right?
the sun comes up. Did he say until you tell me who you are? Like, who the heck are you? What's your name?
Who says to who?
Did Israel, did Jacob ask him that?
Jacob asks him his
And
name,
he never gave him an answer.
does not give
All
him
he
the
said was,
answers.
oh, by the way, you have a new name. And Jacob's like, oh, okay, thank you. And he forgot his question,
I don't know if you got his question, but you know,
but he never got an answer.
if an angel doesn't give you an answer, what are you gonna do? Twist his arm? I mean, I guess
Not
least-
not release him to go to pray.
apparently, but I think instead of finding out his name, he got to know his own name.
It was reversed.
I think also that's, you know, that brings up an interesting point is sometimes you try to get to, you know, we're trying to figure out someone else, whereas where the real challenge is figuring out ourselves. We can talk about that piece also. But I'll tell you this idea that even after we've achieved breakthroughs, we're still human, because that's kind of like what the message is also reflected in a powerful area of Jewish law. So the Torah tells us that a high priest is not permitted to marry a widow. Who says? A Kohen Gadol, a high priest, cannot marry a widow. The question is, why not? It seems like very random. A high priest cannot marry a widow. Why?
Not for all Kohanim?
No, all Kohanim, no. The widow is not, yeah.
Divorce.
Grusha, right. So, yeah, no widows. So the question is, like, what's the deal with that? So I once saw a commentary that said the following. You know, the high priest was unique in that he would go into the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies, once a year on the holiest day of the year, which is Yom Kippur. So the holiest day of the year, the holiest space on earth, the holiest representative of the Jewish people would have the coalescence of time, space, and soul, and the holiest of all three converging. Holiest time, holiest space, holiest person. So the Kohen Gadol would go in and offer prayers, and the prayers that the Kohen Gadol would recite would be very powerful and would take effect. And so we are concerned that the high priest might have his eyes on a married woman, go into the Kodesh HaKodashim on Yom Kippur, the holiest guy, the holiest space, on the holiest day, be thinking about this woman and pray that the husband should die, and the husband will die, and then he would marry her. And so we say, don't even try it, because you still won't be able to marry her if you're a high priest. Do you understand what's going on here? According to this commentary, we even suspect the high priest of maybe having inappropriate thoughts in the Holy of Holies. What's the point? Not that the high priest is like a bum. The point is that even if you're a high priest, even if you are whatever, even if you're Yisrael, you're still a Yaakov also, right? Human beings aren't immune to human things. And therefore, the Torah is reminding us with the Yaakov and Yisrael duality that every one of us can achieve greatness. You can be Yisrael. You don't have to struggle with this. You can overcome the struggle. But even as you do, there will likely be more areas of struggle. You're still not an angel. Reminds me of the story, the Chassidic story they tell. So the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Chassidic movement, is legendary for performing miracles. And one of those miracles that he would perform is called Kfitzat Haderech. What is Kfitzat Haderech?
Teleporting, I guess.
Yeah. Well, literally means shortening, I think, jumping,
shortening the way.
They say that the way he would travel is like this. He would take some of his students, they would go into a horse and carriage. Carriage sounds too fancy. I'm sure it was very horse and buggy. And he would tell the wagon driver, do me a favor, turn around, turn backwards. And they would say, giddy up, or whatever they would say. I don't know what they would say. And the horses would begin moving, and they would start moving so fast that they would bridge space, kind of like teleportation, but in a horse and wagon, and they would get from one place to another in miraculous time. So the story goes, at one time, the horses were in this space because the horses were going really fast. The horses were thinking, wow, we're moving really fast. We must be like super horses. And then the horses thought to themselves, wait, and we're passing all of the normal stops where we usually eat. So I guess we don't need to eat like horses. I guess we're like human beings that can take a little bit longer to eat. And then they kept on passing more of the rest stops, and they said to themselves, wow, we must not even be human. We must be angels, because angels don't eat at all. This is all going within the mind of the horses. Stay with me on this story. And so the horse is like, wow, we must have been transformed by the Baal Shem, by that holy rabbi, not only into super horses, not even into humans, but into angels who don't need any to eat at all. And then eventually they arrive in the destination, and it stops, and the horses are like, oh, we're hungry, and they go, yeah, like now we're horses. So what's the moral of the story? Sometimes we feel very holy, and we should feel holy. And maybe Tishrei this past month, maybe we felt, hopefully we felt holy. But we're also reminded that we're, I don't want to, it sounds not nice. We're still horses, but we're still human.
You didn't go with donkeys.
We're still, we're still horses. At the end of the day, there are still areas in which we struggle, whatever that is for every one of us has our own struggles. And I think that is the lesson of this month, which is, okay, we just had a month in which it's almost like an out of body experience. We have the high, the joys and the moments of solemn connection. We've had these incredible emotions throughout the month of Tishrei, and now it's the month of Cheshvan. And now the band has gone home, and the lights are out, and the cake has been consumed, and everything. Everyone's out of the tux and the wedding dress. It's all, the party's over. Now the question is, what do I need to work on? Right? What am I working on? And so the two words I want to share with you that kind of capture these forms of avodah, of service, what I would call spiritual pleasure versus spiritual surrender. And as you know, that series I've called spiritual surrender. But they're really two spaces: spiritual pleasure and spiritual surrender. What's the difference? Spiritual pleasure is where you're excited about doing the mitzvah, about the spiritual experience. You're getting pleasure from that experience. You're getting excited about, or you are excited about studying Torah, about doing the mitzvah, about praying, about helping someone else out. You're excited about the mitzvah. It's offering you pleasure. You derive pleasure from it. You're excited about it. You want to do it. That's the spiritual pleasure, and that is the Yisrael persona. Excited about doing the right thing. But then there's the other persona, and that is where you're not so excited about it. At least part of you is really not excited about it. You would rather be doing something else. It's the right thing to do, but you'd rather be doing, if you're honest with yourself, you'd rather be elsewhere. And so it's a struggle. This is the Yaakov persona. It's a struggle. When you do it anyway, why do you do it anyway? Because it's the right thing to do. That's what we call spiritual surrender. Spiritual surrender is where you're not so excited about doing it. It's not like a source of like infinite pleasure for you. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do, because this is what you ought to be doing. This is what you must be doing. And so you surrender to the cause, whatever the cause is. You surrender to doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Now, if I ask you the question, which is a greater experience, when you're doing the right thing and you're excited about doing it, and you're doing it with pleasure and with joy and you're fully present in that moment, or you're doing it because you have to do it, and so you're surrendering to it, so you're kind of like relinquishing yourself to it, but you're not really so excited about it. Which would you say is a higher experience? The former or the latter? Pleasure or surrender? Well, hold on, I was going there. But you would have said perhaps, no, it's the right answer, but I was trying to set y'all up, but I think you're on to me. Right? So you would think, right, but the count, I think what we intuitively think is like, oh wow, if only I was excited about doing it, that would be so great. It would feel more seamless. I would feel more present in it. I would get it. I would understand it. I would be excited about it. I would do it with a lack. I would do it perfectly. Whereas in the space of surrender, it's kind of like, a big part of you is not even there. You're just surrendering to it, but it's not really at that point who you are, at least the totality of who you are. And so surrender could lead to pleasure. But as we'll discuss, as Shane is pointing out, as we'll see in this text, spiritual surrender, I guess I gave it away in the title of the book, title of the series, spiritual surrender is actually on one level, a greater experience than spiritual pleasure. Why? Because when we surrender, we are making it not about us. It's completely about the other, in this case, God. Right? When we're doing the mitzvah, whatever it is, because we want to do it, we're getting pleasure, we're excited about doing it. So on the one hand, that's great. That sounds like the ideal. It's like a person wakes up in the morning and they want to daven, they want to pray, they want to do a mitzvah. Like, can't get any better than that. That sounds like ding, 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 we have a winner. That's true. But the flip side is that when that's the experience, then the question is, who are you serving? Are you serving God? Or are you serving yourself because you enjoy it? Now could be worse. You could be serving yourself in any number of ways. I mean, this should be the worst way to serve yourself, serving God. But one can argue that, are you really in it for God, or you're in it for yourself? If I'm excited about it, this doesn't make it bad, by the way. We're just kind of, this was a BuzzFeed article, right? Serving God ranked. Like one way is when you're doing it because you enjoy it. That's great, but there's a little bit of ego in there as well. The other way, which is the spiritual surrender, is where you're not fully committed to this. When I say committed, you're struggling inside. You're the Yaakov. You're wrestling with yourself. By the way, I pointed out before that it says that Jacob was alone and he wrestled with a man. Well, some commentaries say this was a la Fight Club. I hate to give away the end of the movie. There wasn't anybody else there, right? I think that, right? It's been a while, right? So he's fighting with himself. Yaakov is the persona of where you're fighting with yourself. Part of you wants to do it, part of you doesn't want to do it. Part of you wants to daven, part of you is like, nah, God knows what I want anyway. I need to tell him. Right. So the Jacob persona, the Yaakov persona is the struggle. But here's the big idea. But if we're able to somehow muster the courage and the energy to go ahead with what we need to do, in other words, surrender, because, okay, look, I'm torn on this, but I know, despite how I feel, despite my mixed emotions about it, I know that this is the right thing to do. And so therefore, I'm going to set myself aside and do it because it's the right thing. In that moment, one is asserting God above self. In a space of spiritual pleasure, one's own self is aligned with God, and that's beautiful. But the question is, who are we serving? Ourselves or God? And it's not so clear. Whereas if a person is torn, if a person is still struggling with this, but does it anyway, out of a sense of commitment, sense of surrender, I'm doing this for you, not for me. In that case, it's about God and it's not about self. And on one level, not on all levels, but on one level, it's a greater form of avoda, a greater form of divine service. Yeah. Correct. The guilt would probably be more of a negative emotion. So let's leave that one aside. But so really the two spaces that we're focusing on, the space of spiritual pleasure, where we're excited, we want to do it, we find it enriching and meaningful. Like this mitzvah, I get excited about doing this mitzvah, and so I'm doing it. That's great. That means that my pleasure or my excitement is aligned with divine will. That's fantastic. But the more I enjoy it, the more this experience is a little bit self-serving. And I'm sharing this experience with God. So it's a little bit for you, but a little bit for me also. Whereas in a space of spiritual surrender, where I'm only doing this because of God, like I don't really want to do this, but I feel committed to do it because, I appreciate God enough that I'm going to do it. So I'm surrendering to for lack of a better term, to a higher power, right? But I'm not really so excited about it. In that case, it's almost like the full me is being offered in that experience, as opposed to retaining part of me when I'm enjoying it. Does that make sense? Yeah, sure. Yeah, but that's like it's still like along the lines of the guilt persona. We're talking about someone who recognizes the not excited about the mitzvah, but recognizes that God is God, that the mitzvah is God's will. It's kind of like a relationship, right? Not every you have two people in a relationship and they have different minds, different ideas, different feelings about things. They have different likes and dislikes. And so if I'm making dinner and I make stuff that I like, that you also like, that's great. But I'm also winning from that. But if I'm making you dinner, right, and I'm making what you like, and I don't really like it so much, but making it for you, one could argue, again, everything has pros and cons, but on one level, it's more of an offering of self.
Tickets.
Yeah.
Okay, now let me give you another framing of this. There's a biblical mitzvah called bikurim. What are bikurim? Bikurim are, who knows? Yeah, but what kind? First fruits. So if you were a farmer in land of Israel, you would bring bikurim, which are the first fruits. And so how would you know which the first fruits are? So when they began to ripen, you would tie like a string or whatever it is around that fruit. And then when they fully, I guess, came time to pick the fruits, whatever it is, you would take all those first fruits and go to Jerusalem, go to the temple, and you would put them, it's interesting. The Torah says, put them in a basket. I mean, it's kind of obvious. What do you do? Like carry a bunch of, I don't know what that is.
But not the Kroger bag.
I feel like it's a dance. Right. Not a Kroger bag, a basket. The Samta Batena, you put in a basket, and then you go to the temple with your fruit in a basket. The Talmud wants to know what happens with the basket. The Talmud doesn't leave any detail, any stone unturned. You turn stones? I guess so.
See what's under them.
Is it turnable?
So the question is about the basket. So imagine you're the farmer, you bring the fruits in a basket, and I guess you present it in the basket to the Kohen, but then what happens to the basket? So
Wasn't the basket also needed to be like from a certain material? So
No,
like
no.
the rich one not going to be like fancy.
Actually, the Talmud says no.
No.
Listen to this. So the Talmud says, look, if it's a gold or metal basket, a fancy basket, then the Kohen gives it back to the farmer. But if it's a simple wicker basket, then, like of the poor farmer, then the Kohen keeps it. And you're thinking the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Unbelievable. The wealthy guy, he gets his basket back. And the poor farmer, his basket's taken away. This makes no sense. You ready for Kabbalah?
I think it's more, their basket's more special because
When your basket's of gold, not only that, when your basket's made of gold, there's too much ego in there. The Kohen doesn't accept that. The temple doesn't accept. That's not an offering to God. That's you. But when you're coming from a place of surrender, then everything is an offering, including the basket. Isn't that beautiful? Even the basket is an offering when it's coming from a place of humility and surrender. The simple basket is also accepted. It's also part of the Bikurim. It's not a good thing that the fancy basket gets returned. It means that part of it was an offering and part of it was ego, showing off. When it's the simple basket, the whole thing is an offering to God, surrender. So again, two modalities, spiritual pleasure and spiritual surrender. Spiritual pleasure means I'm excited about doing it. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not perfectly an offering to God. There's a little bit of ego. There's a little bit of me that I'm retaining in that experience. Whereas spiritual surrender is completely, seamlessly giving myself over, surrendering to God, and that all of that is to God.
So since all of us are part of God anyway, even our ego, even the part that can get I guess the good feelings about giving this offering. So even when you make dinner for your wife or your wife for you, isn't there an expectation of hey, there'll be peace in family, they'll be nicer, I'll have a better experience, I'll feel better myself because I'm doing it. Isn't it always an expectation that, you know, I will reach a point where I can experience all this, and realize the payoff while I'm doing it, but right now I can't. But I'm doing it.
Yeah,
It's
I'm-
an investment.
Correct. So if you're surrendering for the relationship, then I think you're asking a question: is that surrender or is that pleasure? It's surrender with an agenda. So now is it surrender or is it an agenda? So which one is it? That's a little bit more complicated. I think that for the cost, right?
For fasting, you don't hate it, but in the end, you feel better at the end of the day.
Yeah,
So all of
True.
them have
some physical, some personal benefit also, right? And again, I want to be clear that that's right. That I think, and what I think you're expressing is that having, like, ultimately deriving benefit, whether it's a feeling of satisfaction or connection or other sorts of benefit, that doesn't make it treif. That doesn't make it unholy. That doesn't make it unkosher. That could be a natural part of life. However, in thinking about in terms of our commitment to God, certainly this idea is more manifest when it comes to the surrender than the pleasure elements. Everyone has a copy, and I realize right now, guys, online crew, that I did not scan this in. There is no digital version of this that I could find, so I literally did old school copies on this, but I don't have a digital version, which means that y'all have to listen closely as I read. But by next week, we will have the text scanned in. It was an oversight. I apologize. All right. So I'm going to begin reading. And like pretty much every Hasidic discourse, it always begins with a biblical verse or a story that kind of serves as the introduction to the text, to the main insight, to the spiritual insight. It's kind of like in Hasidic parlance, it's the passport that gets you into that space, into the main conversation. And as I told you, as we started, when I gave you the historical background of this text, I told you that it was a serialized thing that came out every week. So basically, every discourse begins with a verse or an analysis from that week's Torah portion, and then it goes into the meat and potatoes of the conversation. So let's start. Again, sorry guys about not having the text up, but I'll read it now. With the help of heaven, Shabbat Parshat Matot Maseh 5666. So this would be interesting. I could actually look this up with a Jewish calendar, Hebrew calendar converter. I could give you the English date of this. But I will tell you it was summer of 1906. The exact date, I don't know. It's the summer of 06, not 2006, 1906. And it begins with a quote from that Torah portion, Matot Maseh, a double portion, that speaks about the tribes, 2 of the 12 tribes that asked Moses, requested permission to settle outside of Israel, not entering the Holy Land, but settling to the east of the Jordan River. And there's a lot to talk about this, which we're going to get into in a second. Let me just read the verse, or the verses. This is a quote from the Torah. The children of Reuben and Gad possessed much cattle, and they saw the land of Yazer. Yazer was one of the nations or states or regions outside of Israel to the east of the Jordan River. So they saw that land, and behold, it was a place for cattle. It's great for raising cattle. Beautiful. And so they asked Moses, let this land be given to your servants as an inheritance. So very simply, this is from Numbers chapter 32. The Torah tells us about the request of these 2 tribes, Reuben and Gad. They're asking for permission to settle in this land. On the approach to the Holy Land, they essentially said, you know what? Right here is beautiful. We don't want to go any further. Let's settle right here. We want to settle here, and y'all can keep on going into the Holy Land, but we're content with this land right here. What's Moses' reaction? What does Moshe say? He says, are you kidding me? Don't you remember what happened 40 years before? 40 years ago, when we were about to enter Israel, I sent the spies. That was our last text that we studied, right? Moses sent the 12 spies, and they scout out the land for 40 days, and they come back and they give a negative report, and they say, there's no way we can conquer the land. Let's not even try. And because of that, God got so upset. Lack of faith in God, God got so upset, as it were, upset, whatever, that God said, you or all y'all are not going to go into the land of Israel. You're going to wander for 40 years, and only your children will go into the land. And so now these very children, the next generation, Reuben and Gad, they're also saying, we don't want to go into the land. Moses says, are you kidding me? We're repeating the same mess, repeating the same tragedy, repeating the same story. Don't you know what happened? And he just lays into them. Don't you know what happened? Don't you remember what happened 40 years ago? Your parents did the same thing, and we were punished for 40 years of wandering, and now you're doing the same thing. You're repeating the same mistake. And they say, no, God forbid. They clarify their position. They essentially tell Moses the following. 40 years ago, the issue was that the people didn't believe that God could help them conquer the land. We have no such lack of faith. We believe. We absolutely believe. What we're merely asking for is this land over here because it's great for cattle. That's it. This is a very pragmatic request. We have no issues of faith. We have no doubt that God will deliver the land of Israel into our hands. That's not a question. All we want is a good place for our cattle to roam and be happy.
So did they have a lack of belief that in the land that was promised there would be a lack of space?
That's also a good question. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that. I was thinking that also. The question is, why didn't they believe that in Israel there would be a place for their cattle?
They didn't go into Israel, see what was bad and come back out. They were just like,
Right.
This
They're like, this is great. This is great. It's like you're driving up the highway, you have a reservation for a hotel somewhere 3 hours north, and you're like, you know what? This is great. Cancel that reservation. This is good. We're good right here. It's great. Got a swimming pool. It's got, an exercise room. It's got, internet, high-speed internet. This is great. Comfy beds. We're good. Right here. Now, 1 second. They further tell Moshe like this, to prove that we have no lack of faith in God, here's what we're going to do. We will leave our wives and children here and cattle here, but we, the men, we're going to join the other tribes in battle, just to prove that we have no doubt in the ability to conquer the land of Israel. So we're not asking for this land because we're afraid. We're not trying to dissuade anyone else from going into the land. On the contrary, we're believers, and we will go on the front lines. And Moshe says, okay, deal. If you agree to go into battle, the men go into battle on the front lines, etc., with your brethren, then you can leave your wives and your children here and your cattle here. They can settle, and that's many different ways to understand this story. My favorite way, which is not coming up in this conversation, in this discourse, my favorite spin on this story is that this was a statement of love for Moses. Why did they want to settle that land? Think about it. Where was Moses buried? Moses never went into Israel. Imagine if everyone went in and left Moses behind. These tribes were so in love with their leader. They concocted a story. That's why Moses got suspicious, because he realized something's fishy. It was fishy. It wasn't about the cattle. They loved Moses. They didn't want to leave him behind. Yeah, that was already determined. Yeah, everyone knew that. At that point, good question. At that point, it was already determined. That's after he hit the rock, and he had already been decreed that he wasn't going to the land. So they said, he's not going in. On second thought, we don't mind settling here. This is a great place for the cattle. They got great parks. Yeah. No. No, at some point, everybody knew.
Was it not Nebo in that area, or were they north?
That's a good question. So we would have to look. It wasn't too far, because this was already at the final approach. This is Matot Maseh. This is the end of Numbers. The book of Deuteronomy is all taking place in pretty much one location at the border. So this is already, and this is the last portion of the book of Numbers. So already they're pretty much where Moses is going to pass away. It's in that vicinity. And so again, they're asking to stay there. This is not this. This is just a beautiful explanation that I personally love, that I can't help but think whenever I read the story, and I can't help but share because I think it's really beautiful. But there is a flaw in that way of thinking. Because it's about the pleasure, not the surrender. Turns out this is connected, I'm realizing now. Because they want to be next to Moses. But what does Moses want for them? It's like, do you love me? Because you love me. Do you want to? But it's love on whose terms? Yeah, but love on my terms means I want a relationship with you the way I define it. Right, I love you on my terms means that I will define the nature of this relationship, which means that if you're here and I love you and I think that loving you means proximity to you, so therefore I'm going to stay here. I'm going to concoct a story to stay here, connive this situation here with you. Meanwhile, Moses, if you would really ask Moses, guaranteed, you know what he would say? I'm okay, go. Right. Surrender also means loving on their terms, not yours. Right. Yeah. They each get a plus, right? Surrender and you got something, right?
Then nobody actually knew when Moses was buried.
Right.
It wasn't like they can come for the
But-
outside to Israel or anything.
Correct. But at least he's not the only one.
That didn't come into the land.
Yeah, it's a rom-com.
They knew where he
And
walked
it
up.
turns out it's a love story. We had no idea. It's a love story. It's not cattle, it's love. Everything's a rom-com. Everything's right. No, I can't bear to leave you behind. That's the story. It's at the airport. He comes running. She has her ticket. What's going to happen? Is she going to come back? Is he going to? Right. All right. 120 on his birthday, the 7th of Adar. Exactly. That's why 175. No, people years. That's why it's people years. By the way, we're going to get to 120 soon. The way things are trending, we'll get to 120. We wish to this day, the Jewish wish for good health and life is to 120 on May of Esher. Now, let's go back inside. So we just quoted the verses, Reuben, Gad asked, etc., for the land. In the end, back inside our text, second paragraph, in the end, Moses told them, if you will go to war before God and the land will be conquered before God, then this land will be an inheritance for you. So he takes them up on the offer. He's obviously paraphrasing here, but in the middle, they were the ones that offered to go in first. He said, okay, yes, if you do that, if you will go to war with your other fellow tribes, then deal. Now, he asked a few questions here, and these questions are all addressed in the classic commentaries on Torah, but the point is not to ask the questions. The point is to get to a mystical insight that will then explain these on a spiritual level. So we need to understand, he says, why did they specifically, Reuben and Gad, these two tribes, choose the land that was on the other side of the Jordan? Why? Well, we know why. Had lots of cattle, or because Moses was going to be buried there. But he asked the question nonetheless, because again, it's opening up. You always need a question to open up an analysis. Furthermore, why did the inheritance of this land depend specifically upon conquering the land, as Moshe stipulated with them, if you will fight before God and the land will be conquered before God, then this land will be his inheritance for you. Why is one contingent upon the other? Why is settling or inheriting this land east of the Jordan contingent on them going into Israel and fighting the battles? Again, that seems to be an obvious answer, because Moshe wanted to make sure that they weren't chickening out, as it were, or deflating the confidence of the other tribes. Imagine if people, there's sort of like a herd mentality in many things. If you have a group of people that are going to do something and two people pull out, it's very easy for more people to pull out. You with me on this?
The half of Menashe eventually joined them as well. So
I have
sort of like,
I have Menashe. That's it. So I want to finish, but I want to get back to that. So essentially, Moshe was concerned that if you have 2 of the 12 tribes, still a lot of people who are like, we're going to stay here. Y'all keep on going. Then more tribes are just going to pull out. That was his concern. And so obviously them fighting was a way to instill confidence, or to demonstrate confidence and instill confidence in the rest of the tribes. But again, he's asking the question, 2 questions he asks here, which are in order to open up a spiritual conversation. Number 1, Why did they specifically want that land? And number two, why was their settling of that land contingent on them going into Israel? Both have simple answers in the text, but we're looking for a spiritual interpretation. I want to get to what you said, Oded. Ultimately, Moshe says to Reuven and Gad, what happened to Zoom? Oh, it's still here. Ultimately, Moses says to these two tribes, you have a deal, but one more caveat. This is Moshe. Moses says, I'm going to take half the tribe of Manasseh and also settle them here as well with you guys. Why? He didn't trust them. Who was Manasseh historically? Son of Yosef. Who was Yosef? Yosef is someone who always identified with Israel. So to give you, we'll do this very quickly because we're right at the time now. Just a very quick insight into this. When Moses, who was born in Egypt, remember when he had to run away because he killed the Egyptian? And so he runs away to Midian and he goes to the well where the shepherds are, and they were harassing these young women who were shepherds. And he comes to the rescue. And then the girls they go home and they say to their father, Yisro, Jethro, they say, oh, he's like, why are you guys home so quickly today, so fast today? What happened? Oh, well, they say this Egyptian man helped us. They refer to Moses as an Egyptian man. What about Yosef? What about Joseph? Remember when he was working for Potiphar, and Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him and he rebuffed her advances? Remember this? And then she tells her husband that he assaulted her. What does she call him? Ish Ivri, a Hebrew. Which means that Yosef always wore his Israeli nationality, as it were, on his sleeve. Now, the truth is, you could say, well, because he was born there, as opposed to Moshe, who was born in Egypt. I get that. But nonetheless, Yosef is always very strongly connected with Israel. When Yosef dies, he tells his family, bury me here in Egypt, but when y'all leave, take me with you. And so Moses, on the night of the Exodus, he's searching around for Joseph's remains, which leads ultimately to the golden calf, which is a story unto itself. But the point is that Yosef is very strongly connected with Israel, with this pride in Israel, this desire for the Holy Land. And therefore, Moshe says to Reuven and Gad, I'll leave you guys here, but I'm also putting Manasseh here. Manasseh is the oldest son of Yosef, that tribe. Putting half that tribe here also to keep you guys honest, to make sure that you guys are all going to stay focused on Israel and support Israel and not kind of forget about your roots. I'm going to make sure that there's someone here with you that I know guaranteed is always going to remember where they come from, or where their heart really is. And I think this is to those tribes. That's a good question. What happened to them? I think eventually I don't think they ever stayed forever outside. I think eventually they got a bit absorbed in, or maybe the borders kind of absorbed them. The tribes are mentioned. I mean, the tribes I don't think ever went away, but I guess, I don't know. It's a good question.
Were they not part of the Northern Kingdom ultimately?
I think they were, yeah, because the Northern Kingdom was the 10 tribes, and that would include them, yeah. So either they kind of moved in, or the borders kind of wrapped around. We would have to look up those it's a good question. Look up those finer points. But I think that this takes us full circle. The idea that Manasseh was put there to never forget Israel. The great poet Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, who lived in Spain in the golden age of Muslim Spain, so he wrote, "Ani," they say "Ani b'mayra v'libi b'mizrach," something like that. Am I paraphrasing? Is that? It says, "I am in the west, but my heart is in the east." I think, just coming full circle, that this is certainly where we are today, literally today at this moment, that we're in the west, but our heart's in the east, praying for the safety and security of Israel, and for all of our brothers and sisters, and for only blessings and peace and security. And may Hashem really shine His favor. May God shine His favor down upon everyone, and send blessings. And may we hear only good news. Let us say Amen. So in conclusion, today's session, just so we don't lose the plot, today we spoke about two personas, Yaakov and Yisrael, Jacob and Israel. I asked the classic question, why is it that once Jacob's name is changed, why does the Torah itself revert back and forth between the two names? And I explained based on Kabbalah, the answer is, one of the answers given is that these represent two types of divine service. The service of the struggler, Jacob, and the service of the conqueror, Yisrael, the one who's still enmeshed in the battle and the one who has conquered the battle. And I said, although it seems like when you conquer the battle, you're on a higher level because now you want to do it. Now there's no tension, there's no struggle. There's an advantage to the second, to the struggler. Why? Because the struggler is doing, when the struggler does the mitzvah, it's because he or she is surrendering. And that's a pure offering. It's a full offering to God. It's all about God. As opposed to when we're excited about doing, when we've conquered the negative feelings toward it, when we want to do it, so it's beautiful, but there's a little bit of ego intertwined with that, spiritual pleasure versus spiritual surrender. And then after that introduction, we got into the opening verses that the discourse is based on, talks about the requests of Reuben and God to possess the land on the east side of the Jordan. We explained the deal that they struck with Moses, and we asked, why is it that they wanted that land, and why was it contingent upon them going into Israel? We're going to look at this on a spiritual level. Next week, we're going to get into, literally, if you see on the page over here, it says Yaakov and Yisrael. We're literally going to get into what we discussed today and then expand it further. Ultimately, we're going to explain that there are three personas: a child, there's the child, there's the Eved Ne'eman, faithful servant, the child, a faithful servant, and then the simple servant. And that is those are going to be three personas in our spiritual service, roughly correspond to these two dimensions, which we will elaborate on in subsequent sessions. Thank you all for joining me today. One quick announcement that I think is very relevant and important. And that is that look in your booklets, please, if you don't mind. These are programming booklets. As you can see, first of all, before I do this, a special thank you to David and Sarah Leon for helping sponsor today's Kabbalah Café. Thank you very much. Yasher Koach. And coming up Wednesday, take a look at this right here. Wednesday, we have Rabbi Dr. Label Wolf, Australian mystic, mentor and author, who's going to be in town one night only, Wednesday, October 18th, 7:30 p.m. A topic that we chose 6 months ago is, in a fractured world, you need to change your headspace, strengthen your resilience with spiritual training skills of meditation and positivity. This is a topic I chose months ago, and it could not be more relevant today. With everything going on and all the stress and justifiable stress and confusion that we're feeling, how can we remain centered and remain positive and remain focused on what we need to do to strengthen our mind, to strengthen our headspace, to foster personal wellness and spiritual wellness? This will be the topic of Wednesday's presentation. Rabbi Wolf himself has children and grandchildren that are in the war right now, that are in the IDF, Sahel. And so certainly it will be related to everything going on here. It's going to be a very inspiring and uplifting and powerful presentation. Please join us. He is tremendous. Wednesday evening, October 18th, 7:30 p.m. All right. That's all the news is. Thank you very much. Pleasure. So I have a phone call with him tomorrow. I'm going to discuss whether or not we can live stream it. It will be recorded either way. The live stream, I need to find out from him if he's comfortable with that, both conceptually and logistically, if we can do that. One of the challenges with the live stream is just technical thing is if he's a pacer, then we're going to have more of a challenge. If he doesn't mind standing, so I will let you.
Well, you got sound, at least you get the sound.
Definitely. Oh, yeah, you can definitely get the sound. Yeah, we'll try to create some sort of yeah, I'm working on it. It's not the first request. Larry also, there's a few requests out there. We'll see what we can make happen.
Sorry,
Great to see you guys. Choose the food this week. Yeah.
Can we get the menu before we choose if we want to come or not?
No, faith, trust. Good. Great to see you guys. Dr. Maxey, Matt, good to see you. I missed your call today. Give me a call today.
Can I
Good.
ask a question?
Yeah, Susan.
Where do we get these talks again? Do we have to go on SoundCloud? They're very hard to find.
So I try to make it as difficult as possible just to see how committed y'all are. I'm kidding. No, that's a joke. That's a joke.
You're doing an excellent job, Rabbi.
I hope
Congratulations.
not.
So
I hope
Joy,
not.
you have the same question?
Yeah, I
You
do.
could leave it or you can take it.
I've had a really hard time finding them,
Yeah.
to your point.
Yeah.
Yes, because it
Yeah.
used to be easy because it was on a podcast you could find.
Yes, I have a new podcast. It's called Torah Unraveled.
Wait, can you put that in
Yeah, I'll just write the name of it. It's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
Okay.
all that jazz. So it's you
as
just
these classes?
just type this in, Torah Unraveled, and that's it. It should come up. I'll show you what it looks like, the logo, so you make sure you're getting the real deal and not some knockoff.
I just put the Spotify link in the chat.
Oh, thank you very much. And I have Pocket Cast, which is an app on Android for my podcasts, and this is. I know I have my podcast here somewhere. This is what it looks like. The logo.
Okay,
And
it'll have your different classes in there. So it'll have,
yeah. So right now, the last ones that are up there are the High Holiday Boot Camp that we did a few weeks ago.
okay.
And then there's like the previous Kabbalah Café sessions, and we did a Hebrew course. We did a class on business ethics, all of that. Yeah. It basically goes chronologically and sequentially.
Okay.
So that's what it looks like on this.
Found it.
Yeah, I mean, you'll find it.
This is great news. This is great news. Okay, I'm connected. I'm connected.
All right, awesome. Susan, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome
Bye.
back. But
Thank you.
listen, even though you can catch it later, I love when you're live. It's better than catching it later. All right.
Yeah, and maybe I'll come and eat some breakfast soon.
Oh,
Yes.
even better. Absolutely. Yes, we definitely have breakfast for you.
All right, thank
All
you.
right. Good to see you. All right, great to see you guys.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov, yes. Chodesh Tov, Shavua Tov. Lots of blessings. We share good news. Take care. See you guys.